Video.
All right, we can see your hallway, Deborah.
Great. Thank you, Ethan. Hello, I am Deborah O'Keefe, and I want to welcome you to my home and to my home studio in Stanton, Virginia. Stanton is in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. We're just a little bit, about 35 miles west of Charlottesville. It's pretty rural, a small town. And we are upstairs in my house. I think we've been looking at my sign that has my email address and my website on it. If you want to take a quick look at that, and we'll try to pan to it again later if you want to contact me for any reason. I'm taking this down. I want to thank my daughter, who will not appear in this video, but she is doing all the camera work for me and really saving me from making big technical errors. So we're in the hallway leading to my studio right now. And so these are some of my pieces. They are considered mosaic collages, most of them. You can see there's a lot of little pieces. In this case, the pieces are paper rather than tile or stone or glass, like mosaics are often made with. And then I finished them, as Allison said, I finished them with polyurethane varnish, usually at least 4 coats, or polyacrylic occasionally. So now we're coming into my studio, and I have a piece, a collage that is actually in process right now. And so I'm going to do a very short demonstration for you, because this can get boring really fast. So this is what I do. You can see all these little pieces of paper. Now, people, when they come into my booth at art shows, they look at things and they see that everything has been varnished. And so they say, oh, is this decoupage? And I say, well, no, this is mosaic collage. And then they say, well, what's the difference? Well, you're looking at the difference. The difference is anywhere from 100 to 10,000 pieces, little pieces of paper is the difference between the decoupage. But I do put a finish over each piece when it's done, and that really makes a difference in it deepens the colors. Sometimes it changes them. Sometimes it makes some papers more transparent, and it kind of brings everything together. And it also gives a protective coating, so that when I go to art shows and it's humid or it rains, I don't go completely nuts worrying that something terrible is going to happen, because I can just dry things off if I need to. Okay, let's do a little bit of collaging here. I just spread some glue, and this is Elmer's Glue All, which I buy by the gallon. And now I just want to pick out something that I think will sort of fit. So, and I use this stylus. If I didn't have this stylus, I would really have to invent it, because it's an extremely useful tool for me in terms of maneuvering really small pieces into position. Now I've got just a little tiny spot there, so I'm going to put something in it just to give it some. Okay, that's enough collaging. It's boring. Let's look at, this is my whole studio. This is the main room that I work in. You can see I have a lot of paper. I have lots of rolls of paper that I work with. A lot of this is either, sometimes I do things using strips, and I'll cut really thin strips of paper. So you can see I have a lifetime supply here, and yet I still like to buy paper. And then I have paper like this. This is kind of my slush box. So I've got a whole cigar box full of paper. I have all these jars full of paper. I have drawers that have papers in boxes. And then I have paper, like when somebody sends me a card or something in the mail, if the envelope is any kind of nice paper, I will save the envelope and I will use that paper sometimes. Or I also save things like craft paper, old maps, sometimes wrapping paper. A friend of mine sent me paper that she bought when she was in Thailand. And people are always offering me paper. And sometimes people will say, "Oh, I have a bunch of magazines at home," and I say, "That's okay. One magazine can last a lifetime," and I've had a lot of magazines. So this is the main part of my studio, and I have all my art that's available is hanging in here. This is kind of my studio annex, which used to be a sleeping porch, and we finished it. My nephew, my husband, and my daughter finished it off for me, and so now I have this area where I can work. I have my laptop and my Chromebook set up in here, and I have some art hanging. And I come in here sometimes in the evenings so that I can do a little bit of reading. So why don't we spend a little time just looking at some individual pieces of art. Let me show you the very last piece of art that I made. This piece is called Enfolded, and I tried something a little bit different with it. I'll show you. This is a piece on wood, and you can see that it has an underlayer which goes over into the back a little bit. You can also see that all my pieces, I wire them on the back to be hung. I put the title on the back, I sign it, and they are all numbered. This number, the first part of the number means it's the year 2020, and it's the 36th piece I made in this year. So this piece, I just started echoing circles and then adding and working around as this developed. So it was a piece that grew in a way that I couldn't entirely predict. And a lot of times I don't think these through entirely. I just begin at a starting point and I say, I'm going to try a process and see how it turns out. So that's what I did on that piece, and I really enjoyed that. This is a little bit simpler in that I just started, it's also strips going around and around and around, but I started on this piece, Celebration, I started in the middle and then just did a very simple circle. Over here, now the piece that I was working on, that I'm working on right now, will be in some ways similar to this piece, which is called Brave New World, in its center, and that there's a lot of strongly colored pieces of paper, and I just worked on a mosaic collage for a long time. That piece, I think I've been working on this part of it for about 5 days now. It's a little bit at a time, but you know, we have time right now at home. We're not going anywhere. And then this piece is interesting because the outer part of it, this kind of fuzzy edge, this is actually paper from an old wasp, from a wasp nest, the papery kind of wasp nest, not the honeycomb kind of nest, that a friend of mine gave me a couple of years ago for Christmas. And I really enjoy using that paper a lot. Now, this piece here, it's called Peace House. This is what my daughter likes to call it my squiggle technique, where, you know, maybe when you were a child, you would just do a line and it would intersect in many, many, you know, different ways, and then you color it all in. Well, I found that I enjoy doing that sometimes, and then but I fill it in with, sometimes with very detailed collage, or other times these are just whole pieces that I cut out from patterns that I made after I photocopied that. So yeah, and then I do, as Allison mentioned, I do book art also. This is a piece of book art. It's a little bit unusual because I usually just have the book more like that one right up there, where I open it, I staple the book open into place. You can show that I staple it open into place. I put something pretty firm, like a heavy piece of mat board on the back to keep it from flexing. And this one, I reserved out the center pages. And so the outer pages were stapled down and I was able to collage over them. But the center pages, I cut into strips, and then I just put a whole lot of glue in my hands and on this. And it was kind of like somebody would work their mousse through their hair, you know. And so I did that quite a bit. I trimmed it in places to make it a little bit more even. And then after I finished the collage, this has about, I'd say at least 6 coats of varnish on it. I just would drip it on. And it's very, if you were here, you could touch it and you would feel how firm it is. People really like to touch my art, and I don't get upset about that because it can be easily cleaned. So I'm going to hang this one back up, and that piece is called Con Fuoco, which means with fire, and it's $250. But I have a lot of work that's under $100. I want to show you this piece because it's special in this room. This is a collage. It was kind of just a playful piece that I did, but I did it on a piece of cherry wood, which if you look at these, at the sills and this shelf, this was just the end that got cut off of one of those. And it was a nice piece of wood, but you can see it has a little bit of roughness here, like it had been broken or maybe even chewed into a little bit, had some insect damage. And so that got cut off, but it was just a pretty piece of wood. And so I collaged on it and did not cover the wood as usually I like to do. So that piece is called Improvisation on Cherry, and it's $68. So now I probably am not going to have time to show you every single piece, but you can go to my website, and I should explain I am Deborah O'Keefe, but my website and my email address are ameliamondala@gmail.com and then ameliamondala.wordpress.com. The Amelia is a part of my middle name. It was my maternal grandmother's name, and so it kind of carries on that family tradition, although my maternal grandmother would be extremely surprised that I'm doing what I'm doing now. Okay, let's go into the hallway. And I'll show you some pieces here. Maybe let's look at this piece. This piece is called Gloria in Excelsis Deo. It just seemed to me like a very joyful and radiant piece. I sometimes enjoy, this is again the mosaic collage. These are all very, very small pieces, but I liked arranging them so that it's a burst of light out in the center that just radiates out. And that was a piece that I created this year. This piece here, Winter Tree, it was on a piece of architectural refuse, I think, of some sort. I find a lot of substrate at the Goodwill outlet, and so that was something I picked up there. And in this piece, now this little sun type figure is all, again, mosaic collage, all little tiny pieces in there, and with a kind of a red, reserving the reddest pieces for the outer part. But then these, often when I'm cutting other shapes out, I end up with byproducts from the cutting that end up being interesting shapes of their own. So I don't throw anything away. Well, I do throw some things away, but a lot of that stuff that I might have thought to throw away, I save. And so these were just some of the really interesting shapes, that wonderful curve there and this one, that I worked with to create that composition. Now, this is a piece you won't see on my website, this piece called Nature Will Rise Up. And the reason I don't put the very vertical pieces on my website is that you can't, they're very hard to represent. They're so tall that a lot of times you just end up scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and you never really can see the whole piece at one time. But that was a piece also that I just did this year. Here, I want to show you. This was, I think, the second piece I did in 2020. And this is it's called First Night, because there was just something celebratory to me about it. And this paper up here, there are a couple of layers. There's a layer of dictionary that is covering the entire board. And then there's this paper is actually wrapping paper that I think one of my nephews gave me a Christmas gift that was wrapped in this paper, and so I saved it. When I varnished the paper, it was transparent, so we get a little bit of the dictionary bleeding through. And it's the same thing down here. But this, in here, these are all very tiny hand-cut circles. So I have to individually cut each circle to do that. And I just free hand cut them. I don't trace them or anything. I'm just free cutting. But then when I'm cutting these small circles, I end up with a byproduct that's just sort of a lot of triangular and pointy pieces, which I learned metalsmiths call skeletons. And I started saving those because they make an interesting pattern all of their own. And so I kind of enjoyed doing that. This piece is another piece of book art, and this is my most expensive piece of book art by far. But it also was extremely time consuming, but I felt it was worth it. I was very pleased with how it turned out. This piece is called Spirit of the Forest. And all of these pages, you can see, they're all, I rolled them ahead of time and glued them into place. And then I collaged on each one. It's a little bit of a pain to do that, but it can be done. And I was very pleased with what the end product was. So, I mean, there are a lot of pieces out here that maybe we could look at for a minute. This is just a little book. It's called Quattro. I love warm, rich colors. This small book is $75. And then this is my earliest piece. The title of it is Serve, because it could possibly, people kept asking me, can I use it as a tray? And so finally, I just put some little tiny wooden feet on the back of it so that you can hang it, but it also can sit and clear the hanger. And it's actually, I think the one piece I have, it's on extremely heavy cardboard. It was the bottom of a box that a 4-drawer file cabinet came in. So the bottom had to be really strong. And when we cut away the walls and that was what was left, I thought, wow, this is really a pretty firm piece of cardboard. So I decided to do something with it. It took a long time, but I was just learning then. I was just starting out, and this piece has about 6 coats of polyurethane on it, so I can wipe it down periodically too if I need to. Well, we can go into my studio again, and I'll show you a few other pieces. Here's a piece. This piece is called Party Animal. And I didn't start out thinking I'm going to make a party animal, but I thought, well, I'm going to do the collaging, that mosaic collage that I do. But instead of having it come out into a very neat finished edge, like on this really large piece, I thought I'm just going to kind of let it have its own rough shape. And then I did a little bit of drawing with a pen, permanent art pen, and when it was done, it looked very celebratory. And so anyway, that's Party Animal. That piece is $85. This piece is quite a bit more expensive. This is called The Turning World, and it starts right there with a little tiny dot. And then I cut thin strips, and I cut them straight, but I cut them thin, and they have to be about out of paper that's going to flex a little bit and be absorbent. And then I just would go around and around and around and around until I filled out the whole thing. It took a little time. That is, it's interesting to me that I sometimes will start with things in the center that aren't precisely round, but it always ends up becoming circular before it's over. I think there's, in Black Elk Speaks, that he talks about circles. He says everything wants to be round. So let's take a look here at this piece of art, and you can also look at if you want to catch my email address or website to contact me. This is a little piece called Pod, and a friend of mine, when her father-in-law passed away at the age of 97 or 98, he had been an engineer. And he had all of these different templates for circles and ellipses. And she gave me a couple of them, and I thought, oh, this will be fun. I can try doing some things with circles. And so that is one piece that resulted from being able to use her template. Okay, here's a piece that I also did this year. This is called Anemone, because the center piece reminded me of that. And again, I tried a different principle of somehow going in spirals and then connecting them with a sort of network. And again, you can see this is the wasp-made paper, my little collaborator in nature, that I put around the edge of it. I really, in fact, I could probably show you some of that paper. I've got it right up here. It looks like we're almost out of time. So, wasp-made paper. is what it looks like. So it's lovely to work with.
Deborah, your work is very, very beautiful. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions for Deborah before we move along? I haven't seen any questions pop up. I shared your website in the chat, and we'll also share it on our website as well, the link to your website, so folks can go on and purchase your work. Anything last?
Thank you so much.
Oh, I see a question.
Oh,
Is improvisation on Cherry on your website?
yes, it is.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you so much. Everybody stay well and safe. And if you have a creative idea in you, this is a great time to be creative. So take care.
Thank you.